I've just made a pretty big purchase. It's the next biggest purchase after buying this camera that I'm recording this video on, and that's this. Now, what is this, you may think? Well, this is the new 14-inch MacBook Pro. Now, it's not actually that new in the grand scheme of things. I think it's a year-ish old at the time of recording this video, maybe even a year and a half. So it's not new, but it's new to me. The specs of this we'll go over later, but first, let's unbox it. I have with me the new 14-inch MacBook Pro. It's pretty nice, isn't it? Before I start going into what this Mac is about and the spec that I got for it, I just want to say that this is one of the lightest and most powerful MacBooks I've ever held in my hand. If you consider what this can do, it's insanely light for the package. How's there already a scratch on this? Unless that's sticky residue. Oh, it's just sticky residue. Now, this 14-inch MacBook has checked off a lot of boxes for me. It has great I/O, great battery life, an amazing display. And the thing is, I don't need a 16-inch MacBook Pro. That would just be excessive. But 13 inches just doesn't quite cut it. It's just not as big as I was hoping it would be. This is the new 14-inch, which is perfect size for what I'm doing. It's the perfect size to performance that I could want in a laptop. There's so many things that have gone in to this 14-inch MacBook Pro that are so exciting and new that I just had to pick one up and I had to talk about it. I know this isn't new. It's not new to the YouTube platform and to the general public, but it is new to me. And that's why I'm going to talk about it, because it's something exciting, it's something new to myself, it's something that I've not used in person before. I've only ever seen them in Apple stores. But using this the past couple days, it's amazing. I think I smacked my night. As I said before, I could not have asked for a better spec'd MacBook. I do have some notes written down here on a notebook just so that I can make sure that you guys really get the full idea about what this MacBook is about. Let's start off with the display. We have a 14.2-inch display with ProMotion, which, if you don't know what ProMotion is, it allows for a variable refresh rate monitor. It can go up to 120 hertz. It can refresh 120 times in a second. So the monitor or the screen or the phone or the computer you're watching on now is probably a standard 60 hertz display. So it can refresh its image 60 times in a second. This MacBook can refresh up to 120 times in a second. You get some insanely smooth user interface experience. It's just amazing. It's blown me away. I love it. I've always loved the Apple displays that they've put out, whether it be their external displays that you can plug into an iMac or a Mac Pro, whether it be the MacBook displays or just an iMac display. Their displays have been beautiful right from the get-go. Their colors are amazing. They've just managed to make the best displays on the market for content creation. I have a pretty good monitor for my own PC that I do most of my video editing and photo editing on, and this MacBook display tops it. Now, it's not as large. My PC display is 27 inches and this is 14.2, so there are some spots where this doesn't quite add up, but it's still amazing. 120 Hz, amazing 4K display. The resolution of this MacBook Pro is 3024 by 1964 with a 254 pixels per square inch. You get a really good pixel density with this. And if you don't understand the whole like what pixel density is, the way that we measure it is in an inch. So in how do I explain it? Essentially, the more pixels per inch you get, the higher the PPI number is, the better clarity you're gonna get from that display and the less pixelation you're gonna see on images and just overall use of that display. The last thing I want to mention about this MacBook Pro display is how thin those bezels are. If you've ever used a Mac before, especially an iMac, an Intel iMac, you would have noticed that the bezels are pretty chunky. For those who don't know, a bezel is that kind of black border you see around the actual image of the display. This MacBook Pro has super thin bezels. Yes, it has a notch. For those of you who are going to be writing in the comment, yeah, but the notch sucks and I hate the notch. You'd barely notice the notch. After, yeah, you flip open the display, you notice it right away, but once you actually start working and using the laptop, you don't actually notice the notch sticking out like that. And plus, the notch hosts the brand new 1080p webcam. We don't have any of that stupid 720p webcam garbage. We now have the new 1080p webcam that we saw in the iMac. That has blown me away at how much of a difference it makes going from a 720p webcam on the iMac upstairs in my house and the webcam on this MacBook. It's just beautiful. I didn't know I needed a 1080p webcam until I had one. It just produces an image so much more clear and so much better than that old garbage webcam. So let's go into the speakers on this MacBook. If you've ever used MacBook speakers, especially the newer MacBooks, I would say since 2016, they've gotten really, really good on the MacBook themselves. So if you've ever used those, you know that they're really good, but they always lack one thing, and that's really good bass response. They have bass, like the older MacBooks, they had some bass response, but it wasn't very deep, it wasn't very boomy. On this MacBook Pro, there's actual bass. Like, you notice the bass in the music or the video or whatever you're watching. You actually notice it. My girlfriend has an M1 MacBook Air, and yeah, those speakers are great. Don't get me wrong, they work perfectly. You can video edit on them, you can even do some audio finessing on them, and it won't be a problem, but there's just not as much bass. Whereas these, amazing bass response. These drivers are also upward facing, so you'll see them on either side of the keyboard. You just get a more directional audio experience from the MacBook Pro. It's firing straight up at you. There's nothing in the way like a keyboard. The clarity is beautiful. I could not have asked for a better set of speakers in a 14-inch MacBook Pro or in any other MacBook or any laptop of this size. Now, one of the big reasons why I bought this over an M1 MacBook Air or the M2 MacBook Air is the port selection. For the average Joe who's working on some school, does mostly document writing, watching videos, web surfing, all that fun stuff, ports aren't really a big deal. As long as you have a way to charge it and a way to plug in a USB to charge something else or to plug in like an actual data drive into it, you're good. But for someone like myself, I kind of wanted that SD card. I know it's kind of a stupid reason. I know what you're thinking. Well, why did you spend $1,500 more on the MacBook Pro when you could have gotten it for like $1,000 and gotten a MacBook Air and had very similar performance? Well, I mean, for one, you wouldn't get similar performance. Yes, you'd get good performance, but not the same as the MacBook Pro 14. For someone like myself, I don't want to have to take up a whole other port just to plug in an SD card. With this MacBook, I can have an external display connected, an SD card plugged in both reading or writing, I can charge my MacBook and still have 3 extra ports available for data transfers. You don't get that on an M1 MacBook Air. You don't even get that on the M2 MacBook Air. This MacBook has so much I/O that it's perfect for what I need it for. From that last little excerpt, you probably could have figured out what kind of I/O this MacBook has, but I'm still gonna tell you anyway because it's mind-blowing. This MacBook Pro has 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports, 1 HDMI 2.0, 1 SDXC port, and 1 MagSafe 3 port. That's insane. Oh yeah, and a headphone jack, 3.5mm headphone jack. It allows me to do so much more than if I just copped out and got an M1 MacBook Air or even the M2 MacBook Air. This means I can have an external SSD plugged in, I can have my SD card plugged in, I can plug it into an external monitor and charge my device, all at the same time and not have any bandwidth issues. That, to me, is invaluable. Having that availability to plug in just about whatever I want all at the same time allows me to do so much more and be so much more productive on the go. You just can't get that from an M1 MacBook Air or an M2 MacBook Air or even the gross Intel MacBooks, which can be a good deal, but not for what I'm doing. Now, speaking of MagSafe, this MacBook has brought back MagSafe to the Mac. I miss MagSafe, and that was one of the biggest reasons why I never really saved up and bought any of the other MacBooks since a 2015 MacBook Pro. If I had bought a MacBook since the 2015 MacBook Pros, I would have bought a base model because, let's be honest, Macs are expensive and Apple likes to charge you a lot for their products. And with a base model, I would have had 2 Thunderbolt ports, which means I have to charge my device with 1, which leaves me only 1 left, which means I'd have to get an extra dongle or some other device that allows me to adapt the 1 USB-C Thunderbolt into multiple devices. And that just wasn't ideal for my workflow and didn't serve the purposes that I needed met. So with this, amazing. MagSafe is back. And just to make it that much better, in the box, you get a braided, yes, braided cable. You get a braided MagSafe cable. None of that silicone garbage cables that we get with every other device that we've bought that just end up snapping at the connector. We get a braided cable. Yes, I've said braided cable a lot in this last paragraph, but it's important to me that these details stand out to you because these are the details that matter. These are what make people come back to Apple and buy more of their products. They put the details into their products that make people really enjoy them and have a good user experience with them. And even better, it's not built in to the charging brick itself. It's USB-C to MagSafe 3, which means I can use any USB-C capable charging brick and plug this cable into it, which means traveling is 9 million times easier. Before, you'd have to unplug it from the wall, coil it up on the end of that brick or coil it around that brick, and then shove that in there. But that was always an awkward shape and an awkward size to fit somewhere. Whereas now, you can unplug it from the brick, coil up the cable, take the brick, shove it in your bag. You can fit those individually, and they fit so much better, and they fit in so many more places now that they're detachable. Speaking of little design things that make people really enjoy the user interface, let's talk about that keyboard. There's not much to talk about, but just look at it. If you've ever seen one in person or you're seeing this B-roll for the first time, look at that keyboard. That matte black, blacked out design, where not only the keys, but the area around that keyboard is just completely blacked out. It's those little details that make me love this device even more. On previous MacBooks, you notice that they would have that concave indent for the keyboard to lay in, so it would, lie flush with the rest of the top case. But now, instead of leaving it just the standard color of whatever that top case was, they've blacked it out. It just gives you a more professional feel when using the MacBook. It makes you feel important. It makes you feel like this device is a professional grade device for you to use. It just gives you a more overall feeling that you're actually being more productive and you're using high quality product. Now yes, it is as simple as just powder coating that area, but it's these details that matter. I know I haven't even gotten to the specs of this MacBook and you're probably wondering, what did you buy? Well, I bought the base model. I bought a base model MacBook Pro 14-inch. The base model MacBook Pro 14-inch has the M1 Pro chip with 512GB SSD, 16GB unified memory, 16-core GPU, 8-core CPU, a 1080p webcam, and a 14.2-inch ProMotion 120Hz display. For a base model, those are some incredibly powerful specs. You may be thinking, 512 gig SSD, that's not a lot. Well, that's true, and that's why I've bought an external SSD to go with the MacBook. And if you think about it, an external SSD actually allows for more versatility. I can bring it on the go, plug it in, edit right off of it. I've bought an SSD that transfers at 1050 megabytes a second, or 1.5 gigs a second. So it has really fast read and write speeds, which allows me for really fast photo and video editing. Currently on my PC, I'm editing off of just a standard hard drive, which, if you know anything about PCs, a 7200 RPM drive isn't very fast for data transfers. So I can tell you, any photo and video editing off that external SSD is going to be miles better than what I'm doing on my PC. But back to versatility. It allows me to start a project and edit it on the SSD, and then move that entire project to my PC. All I gotta do is unplug it from one and plug it into the next, and away we go. We've already started a project here, and we're just continuing it here. And then when it's done, export it to the SSD, move all of the files onto the PC or onto a mass storage device. And then it's all done and ready to go. And I've already done a little bit here, a little bit there, and it's just completely done it in a way that allows for more versatility and a way better workflow. Now, throughout this video, I have hinted as to what exactly I'll be using this MacBook Pro for. But if you still don't quite 100% know or want to know more about why I bought a MacBook Pro instead of an M1 MacBook Air, hit the big red button below, hit that thumbs up, and comment down below what you actually think I've purchased this device for. I want to know what you think, and I want to know what you would use this device for in your own workflow. And if you get some other device over it, whether it be a Windows laptop or a different MacBook or even an iMac. Let me know these things in the comment section below, and I'll get back to you as to what this device is actually going to be used for in a future video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you then.